All right, so thank you for having me. My name is Nicole Hansen. I am the Executive Director of Out for Justice. And Out for Justice is a nonprofit org that advocates for individuals with criminal records through policy reform. So essentially, we are the policy arm for the reentry community. Currently, this legislative session, we have a few things. We have unit rule, which I will make sure that you all get a fact sheet on, which enables individuals to expunge eligible offenses, even if it's in a unit of charges. Expungement is a issue that Out for Justice wholeheartedly supports, and we partner with Job Opportunities Task Force each year to expunge nonviolent convictions. We believe that if you have not been convicted of the crime and the state has dropped the charges, that your offense should be automatically expunged. And so I make sure you get that in the PowerPoint too. The issue that we are co-leading on, and it is the baby of our 2019 legislative agenda, is women's pre-release. And so currently, there are about 745 women incarcerated in the state of Maryland, and there's a disproportionate representation of black women in the institutions. The average stay lasts at least maybe less than 4 years, which is 6.8 for women, is for men. And women are twice as likely as men to be incarcerated for nonviolent crimes. 75% of these women are primary caretakers and sole caretakers of their children. And nearly 42% of all mothers are the sole primary financial supports for their family before incarceration. So what do you think happens to the family when the sole financial bearer is behind the walls? And 67.9% among those women are African American mothers. The needs upon release are great, and the women need mental health treatment, social activities, civic engagement, alcohol and drug treatment, abuse treatment, financial security, education, and housing, right? And the ability to secure a job is crucial to the successful reentry of Marylanders returning to their communities from prison. What is pre-release, you ask? Pre-release is a status. It's the lowest security level. Pre-release facilities have the fewest security features, and for incarcerated individuals who present the least risk of violence or escape. An excellent record of behavior, and individuals may be eligible for work release, special leave, compensated leave, and compassionate leave, for families. Work release is different. Work release is an opportunity program that allows people to leave the institution, the facility, to go out and work. A pre-release facility is designed to provide low-risk individuals with the opportunity to rehabilitate their lives by using occupational skills or acquiring new ones in preparation for their return. So, currently, how many women's pre-release centers do you all think there is in Maryland? Just give me a rough number. 2. You said 3. Any other numbers? 1.
I want to say 0. I think there ain't.
Sad but true.
Yes. Now, 0 because there are no state-run, separate brick-and-mortar centers designed specifically for women. There is one, however, in Montgomery County, but in order for the women to be eligible for that center, you have to live in Montgomery County, right? And so what is happening here in Maryland when it comes to, now let me tell you something. The rate of incarceration for women has increased 700%. Wow. 700%. So women are constantly flowing in and out of the penal system for non-violent offenses. So families are being destroyed for non-violent offenses. And here in the state of Maryland, somehow there has not been a political will to put the funding behind a designated facility for women to be able to navigate life after entry, right? So when you are a woman, you are expected to come straight home and snap back into being a mother, paying bills again, being a productive citizen, and that is very difficult when within the 2 years that you were eligible for to be released, you were eligible for these services, you wanted to get back, get access to vocational training, you need to just navigate the transit system, the link. Some people in Baltimore call it the missing link. And women are not able to do that, right? But men are. There are over 9 separate brick and mortar pre-release facilities for men, and this is a problem. This is a problem because we have women who a lot of times get charged with child abuse and all these different things without people knowing the barriers that they face coming home from prison or jail. And so we want the state, we want you all to get behind mandating that corrections provide a separate brick and mortar pre-release for women because we are the bearers of community. There's a woman who just got elected to the chair of the Democratic Party.
Woo! Yeah! Yay!
Women run this state. And so while we make this is something that we really need you all to get behind. No matter what area of focus you have, this is something that's important. And if we want folks to come home and do well after incarceration, we need to make sure that we're providing them those resources within 2 years of them being released. Thank you very much.
Great job.
Next is Diana Phillip from Merrill Pro-Choice.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing?
Great.
Hi there.
All right. So I have a lot to talk about. I'm going to do this very quickly. It's a legislative session, so what does this mean under the Trump-Pence administration? It means that it doesn't matter that we're a blue state. We're going to still have anti-choice that are going to put folks are going to put in the same bills that we try to kill every year. The focus is going to be on later abortion again because we're one of the few states in the nation that offers later abortion. We have people from the eastern part of the United States around the world that come to Bethesda and the D.C. area to get procedures that are 26 weeks or more. We anticipate the Supreme Court is going to have its first ruling about whether or not we can offer later abortion in the United States, probably in the summer of 2020. So we are anticipating and gearing for the worst. This legislative session, we're going to probably see some bills that are going to try to ban abortion at 20 weeks. Probably put in some other things regarding forced ultrasounds, misinformation as part of informed consent. We'll be looking at probably another bill, possibly about parental notification. And just for you to be very clear about this, in Maryland we have a parental notification law in which a physician is able to bypass, unlike other 37 states that require a young person to go to court and get a court order to get an abortion without parental involvement. 95% of the youth in your state have their parents or legal guardians involved in the abortion decision-making process. Those 5% do not because their parents are incarcerated, missing, deceased, or there's a considerable amount of abuse, neglect, and separation in which that young person cannot bring their parents into this. So do not get caught in a parental rights situation where someone thinks that parental notification is a good idea. It is not a good idea. A fetal homicide bill was introduced last year. The law in Maryland is since 2004. There can be a separate charge for homicide or manslaughter if the fetus was viable. People were trying to change it to any stage of pregnancy, including a fertilized egg. We're not interested in doing that because that would establish personhood in the state, which is not something that we want to do. Domestic violence advocates are putting together a bill that would have an enhancement in the sentencing if there is a pregnancy loss. So that's the way that we think we're supposed to go. Please do not try to support the fetal homicide bill. But what are we doing proactively? Well, a lot of what we're doing proactively are fine-tuning some of the laws that we were lucky to pass the last 3 years, and also asking for people on the county level to help us with implementation. Because as great as it is that we pass these laws, I think a lot of people forget about the implementation part, right? Looks good on the books, but is it actually working? The Maryland Contraceptive Equity Act went into effect on January 1st. It says that there are certain co-pays and no pre-authorizations for birth control access. Part of that is no co-pays for emergency contraception. We're in the middle of a study right now in which we're getting people to go shopping with their insurance cards and their Medicaid cards to find out if the pharmacies and insurance companies are abiding by the law. In terms of emergency contraceptive access, we really feel strongly putting in a bill, again, to say that all public college campuses that house students should offer 24/7 access to emergency contraception. Why? Because this is backup birth control. If the Trump-Pence administration, we are concerned that people are going to be losing their health insurance access, and we're just going to make it more and more difficult for people. Young people on your campus, they deserve access to EC. Some of the college wellness centers make it very difficult by mandating appointments, charging them $75 for those appointments, having it delayed by a couple of days, and then charging them another $25 for the EC. When you go to your pharmacy, it's anywhere from $37 to $50, and not every pharmacy will cover EC, will actually carry it. And people seem to think, some of the pharmacists seem to think that there's a gender restriction and an age restriction on top of it. So we want college students to have access to this very important birth control method. Reproductive Justice Inside is a coalition that we formed a couple of years ago in order to look at the sexual and reproductive health experiences and realities of people that are inside our facilities, from the state prison, the county jails, local detention centers, and juvenile services. We were very fortunate the last year to pass 2 laws. One, mandating menstrual products, menstrual hygiene products, being free and accessible to everybody inside. And that every facility, this is the first law of its kind in the United States, that every facility has to have in writing all the pregnancy-related health care services. So someone who's pregnant has a positive pregnancy test shall be handed that policy so they know where they stand in terms of their pregnancy. So on a county level, we're asking for people to help us coordinate jail tours, where you go into your county jail and you find out, okay, where are all the menstrual hygiene products and how do people actually get them? When people have the right to express milk and store it, how does that get done? What does it look like when you're somebody with a positive pregnancy test and you're handed this written policy? Great, what's a copy of that policy? That's part of the implementation on the county level. A lot of folks can help us with. And last, pregnant and parenting students, we're the second in the nation to pass a law saying that there are certain legal and medical reasons that pregnant and parenting students should have excused absences at their public high schools. And for that, what we're trying to do is have education goals met for kids to be able to have economic security as parents and be able to realize their parenting goals. So one of the things that we said is that these policies need to be in the school district websites, but you know, I can't even find some of these policies in the school district websites, so we want to do a small change that says it has to be in the high school websites. We did a search of 50 out of the 323 high schools, and only 1 had it on their website that you have this right to a legal and medical excuse to take care of your baby when your baby is sick, to be able to take care of yourself after you give birth. And in that, we're interested in figuring out a way that people should have a right to pump in our public high schools. That's not only just for students, but the faculty and the teachers as well, anybody who has an authentic business coming up in our high schools. And so we want to do some accommodations work, and that might be county ordinances. So we'll be looking for help with that. I'm also tinkering with the idea of a task force bill, though, for the legislative session, saying that we need to figure out a good way to actually track the educational outcomes of pregnant and parenting students so we can help them graduate from school. So we can figure out what the barriers are, because I know one of the barriers is lack of child care. It's one of the #1 reasons why our kids, after they give birth as high school students, when they don't come back, is that there's no one coordinating that child care. It's very difficult for them to realize their goals. Thank you.
Great job.
Okay, our next speaker is for Maryland Now, and actually their speaker is going to be Delegate Terry Hill. So Terry's going to talk for Jillian Drummond, who is also supposed to be here but is not here yet.
Good afternoon and happy Hanukkah. And I've been asked by now to speak particularly about one bill, and I was hoping that Jillian will walk in the door magically before my time is up and she can talk about the other issues. The bill in particular that I want to bring to your attention is what I call the failure to launch bill, right? So we have a lot of young people who are stuck at home at the ages of 19, 20, 21, 22, and a lot of parents are going, get out of my basement. And one of the problems with that is that we know the cost of education has gone up astronomically. We also know that some years ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, when you reached age of 18, or you graduated from high school, or you got your GED, it was a reasonable expectation that you could get a job that would allow you to become an independent, self-supporting adult. The reality is that in 2018, 2019, simply having a GED or a high school education is not adequate for becoming an independent adult. And the vast majority of people need at least 2 years of post-secondary school education. So here is the problem. When families are intact, meaning mom and dad are still together and whatever that form is, they make decisions about what their child's abilities are, and once the child finishes high school or leaves high school early, they make decisions together about whether or not they're going to continue to support that kid in some way. We're going to give you decreased rent, we're going to help you with your school costs, we're going to do whatever. Maybe you're going to give them the full ride. Who knows, buy them a car and an apartment building. Give them $1 million to start their own business.
They do that.
But for kids who are caught up in the equity courts, kids who are children of divorce, separation, or in some cases the parents have never been legally bound other than by, say, some kind of consent of the court in terms of child support. When they turn 18, unless they're still in high school, in which case the age is 19, their parents get to walk away. Or at least the non-custodial parent gets to walk away. And so the custodial parent has a choice. They can walk away too, but then that means as a society we're bearing the brunt if that kid fails to launch. And so what this bill does is it simply restores to what it was previously for the purpose of child support only, the age of majority to 21. Okay? And so that's the bill that we're really pushing for. We think that it makes a difference. We think as now that it's particularly impactful for women, since the vast majority of single family headed homes, the vast majority of people who are the custodial parent are women. And since women already make, what, 79 cents on the dollar to men, so they have less income. So if they are the parent that says, I can't not support you because I need to get you out of my house, they're left carrying a burden that is unfairly shared. And so that's what we're trying to do, to restore that age to 21. And again, I emphasize for the purpose of child support only. So we know the age of majority varies. So you drink at 21, you can go off to war at 18. Right now, although this may change in the next session, you can get married with parental approval at age 15 or 16. So, right, so we've got all of these issues. And that brings up what we expect also to see some legislation this session that deals with the age of majority in other aspects. But that's the bill that I particularly wanted to introduce to you. Are we out of time? Okay. So, since I have the time, and unfortunately Jillian's not here, so I can't speak too much, but I do want to bring up at least one or two other things. So I sit on Health and Government Operations, so I want you all to know that pharmaceutical cost escalation and access and affordability of health care are going to be primary issues in this legislative session as well. In addition, I will be reintroducing some legislation to make youth sports healthier and safer for our kids to participate in. It may or may not, some legislation may or may not take on the same focus that I had personally, and this is not speaking for now, last year, which was to look at head injuries in youth sport and try to make sure that we can stop those activities that make kids prone to head injuries, because the developing brain, ages 2 to 14, is particularly susceptible to trauma that causes later damage and even chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But I have been working with a number of youth sports advocates, coaches and all, to look at everything from overheating to repetitive injuries. And it's what they do at the college level, what they do at the high school level, we're not really talking about, but we are talking about kids ages 5 through 12, 13, and that age, and what we can do to make sports safer so that they can gain all of those wonderful benefits of being in competitive sports without so much of the burdens that go along with it. Got 4 minutes to go. Jill! Anybody else formerly from now want to speak to some of the other issues that now is? And I'm going to return the minutes, and if she gets here, we'll give them back to her. How about that?
Good job.
Okay, our next speaker is from the Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women, and that is Michael Hill.
Okay. Sorry. How many of you are familiar with the Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women, MLaw? Good, that's fantastic. I am going to tell you a little about MLaw, and also Carly was passing around a flyer, and I'll mention that, what's on that in a minute. MLaw is a unique coalition, and there are almost no others like it in the United States, which is unusual because it's a very simple concept to successfully bring together advocate groups and advocates from all over Maryland. And this year, MLaw celebrates our 24th year as a statewide voice for women and families. We coordinate a nonpartisan statewide coalition of women's groups and individuals that mobilizes networks, groups, and individuals to help pass legislation to make Maryland a better place for women and families. Between 1994 and 2018, MLaw supported 88 successful pieces of legislation that have made a difference for women and families in Maryland. And this legislation addressed a variety of issues, including domestic violence, sexual assault, economic justice, human rights, healthcare, family law, and criminal justice. In the 2018 legislative session, 4 of the 7 bills of the MLaw legislative agenda passed the General Assembly. Every year, MLaw holds a fall legislative conference where lead groups, that is, advocacy organizations and legislators, present bills affecting women and families. Almost 200 people attended this year's conference. Many were new attendees. The conference also includes an Advocacy 101 workshop for those who are new to advocacy. So the MLaw board ensures that proposals that are presented at the conference meet criteria to be included. And we are passing around a flyer that lists all 15 proposals that were presented this year. They won't all be included on the agenda, but these are the ones that were presented. And you'll see there's a real diversity of issues that were presented. So they must address a women's issue. They must be able to be addressed through the legislative process. They must have an identifiable, sustainable lead group that agrees to shepherd the legislation. They must have a sponsor, and they must have a reasonable expectation of success. So you can look at the list of proposals that were presented. These now go on a ballot, which is sent to all of the paid MLaw members who are asked to rank the proposals. And usually 6 to 8 of the top proposals are selected for the final agenda. MLaw members are voting now. If you are interested in voting on these issues and selecting the final issues that are going to be on this year's agenda, you can join MLaw immediately, preferably online. It goes faster that way, because the deadline to submit is December 7th, so it's only a week away. Then the MLaw board will review the rankings and finalize the 2019 agenda issues. Individuals and organizations are asked to sign on as supporters of the agenda and the final document. And then the selected legislative proposals and the list of supporters is prepared for distribution. You can also sign on now. Anyone can sign on. Individuals, groups, family members, friends, anybody. You don't have to be an MLaw member to sign on. So if you're interested in signing on, there's a sign-on sheet outside on our table. What do we do during the session? The final agenda document is published and distributed to every legislator, as well as advocates and advocacy groups. And it's also distributed to the approximately 700 attendees at the Women's Legislative Briefing, which is held at the end of January. It's also widely disseminated through emails, our website, Facebook page, and other electronic media. So you can get the final agenda and see what's on it, and then follow up. MLaw holds an annual agenda reception in Annapolis in February. This year's reception will be held during the first or second week of that month. Look for the save the date to make sure that you get alerted to the fact that there is the upcoming reception. You can sign up on our email list, and you can also check the website. So that's a time when the agenda is formally announced. There are a lot of legislators that attend. It's a great opportunity for networking. And the people who are presenting on the agenda issues also speak. So what else do? We coordinate with all the lead groups, we write letters of support, we do updates and alerts, and we communicate outcomes. And we also have a wrap-up event. So we encourage you to get to know us and the issues that are on the agenda, get to know your new legislators, contact your legislators, old and new. You can write, you can call, you can contact lead groups for further information, you can attend a hearing, you can even watch them or listen to them online, you can submit written or oral testimony, you can find out how your legislators voted, and hold them accountable. Again, you can sign up for our email list to get more information. You can check out our website, spread the word, join MLaw, and help us build collective power. Thanks.
Who are interested in ending sexual violence. And I have to say thank you before I say anything else, because the people in the room there are part of the reason that we finally passed the Rape Survivor Family Protection Act last session. And as a result of rape, yes, absolutely. If you become pregnant as a result of rape, then you can ask the court to terminate the parental rights of the rapist. And I'm also pleased to say that with my client's permission that we successfully were able to use the law just about a month ago now. So it's already helping survivors, so thank you for that. I wanted to talk about three areas of legislative activity this session. The first one is no surprise. It helps to respond to #MeToo and to the way that women and men and others have been treated in the workforce and responding to sexual harassment. So I expect to see a number of bills to address access to the court. Right now, in order to use our sexual harassment laws, you have to report within 300 days, and you have to have an employer who has more than 15 employees. This is really too much of a burden for survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And in particular, the high number of employees rule really excludes many low-income women, women of color, people who are nannies and housekeepers and folks who are working in others' homes, who are often some of the most vulnerable to sexual harassment. So we expect to see legislation to give people a longer time to file, to cover more employers, and really to make sure that people have better access to the courts. So that will be probably a series of bills. A second area of legislation this year will be for sexual assault forensic exams. Many people are aware that we really have done a terrible job throughout the country in using the rape kits that survivors have collected. And I still am really astounded and very disappointed that people look at this as some sort of individual benefit to a rape survivor. And certainly rape survivors often feel gratified when the criminal justice system works, but the reality is the people who submit the rape exams, which take hours and disregard consent, who use force, who rape people when they're intoxicated, all of those things. And we really need to hold these women and men and children up as heroes and not simply destroy their rape kits or not test them. So we made some progress on this already. We now have a law in Maryland that requires that rape kits be retained for 20 years. But now we're at the place where we're looking at when are we going to test the rape kits and make sure that we're really finding out what that evidence is and using the evidence that's been collected to make an assessment about whether or not to prosecute. And then the third area of the law that I'd like to talk about, and this, I'm telling you, this is the most radical ever. This is the idea that we should prevent HIV for rape victims. Yep, you heard that right.
Yeah.
Prevent HIV for rape victims. So there's medication now that if you take it within 72 hours of exposure to HIV, it will prevent the infection. And the state of Maryland is saying that it's very confusing and very, very difficult to figure out how much this would cost, and they're just not sure what to do. And they just issued a report within the past couple of days saying that they still are just not really sure, how much this would cost. Maybe we shouldn't do this. So we had a little boy down on the Eastern Shore. His parents could not afford the thousands of dollars of co-payment in order to get the medication, and he was brutally raped. And now he has HIV because the Hogan administration really is saying, no, we know about this, but we are not going to pay for it. So I think that cost is always a thing to talk about for sure. But there are certainly ways to look at this issue to provide the medication, and even if we just did a pilot project for a couple of years to provide medication to prevent HIV in rape victims, this is the right thing to do, and at least doing a pilot project will give us the data that people are asking for about cost. So there are other things that we'll work on in Annapolis, but I think that we really wanted to say at ACASA, thank you to all of you, not only for the rape survivor bill, but I also just have to say that we will have 72 women in Annapolis this year. 72 delegates record for Annapolis. An amazing thing, and will really make a difference for sexual assault survivors and hopefully for the entire state. So thank you for that. And CASA sends out legislative alerts. We're happy to send them through you guys as an organization. You're also welcome to join us as individuals. You don't need to pay any money or anything. We will let you know what bills are up and who to call. And I really want to encourage everybody to make calls, make emails, and remember that you don't have to make every single call or every single email. Nobody has to do everything. But if we all do something, we will continue to make a difference for rape survivors. So that's what I had to say today. I'm happy to answer questions if you think our technology will deal with that. Thank you again for accommodating me. I really appreciate the ability to call in instead of drive up there.
Thank you, Lisa. We are unfortunately out of the Baltimore Child Abuse Center, and we should welcome Joyce Lombardi. So give her a warm welcome.
Good afternoon. I have technology too, and hopefully it's going to be a little bit easier. Let's see. Hey Lisa, if you're still there, is it here we go? Oh, look at that. And then we go here. All right. So, yes, mine is, I'm from the Baltimore Child Abuse Center. And so, like Lisa said, yes indeed, we also have a Me Too issue. Me Too starts really young. And I just learned the statistic, and it's a number, that in the sexual assaults that happen every year in America, can you guys hear me? Sexual assaults that happen every year what percentage do you think?
Use the portable mic.
What percentage do you think are kids under 17? All of them, or like 10%? You guys hear me?
Oh, real good.
Anyone want to throw out a number? 80, 60. Yes, 70%. So 70% of all sexual assaults, and that's defined as anything that's contact. So it's forcible, rape, sodomy, all the good stuff. 70% children under 17. And you know and I know who predators pick. They pick vulnerable kids, sometimes the most vulnerable of the vulnerable kids who don't even know their sexuality yet, maybe gay, lesbian, bi, maybe kids who are outsiders. And what we know about child abuse, child sexual abuse, is that the effects can often last a lifetime. Right? ACEs, you see the word ACEs up there, adverse childhood experiences. You know from the groups that you were working with, trauma in childhood, things that happen to kids. It takes them a long time and there are costs. They can get mental health services, but they still have to be resilient and climb out of all of that, and they do, and thank heavens they do. So we have 3 bills. We have a little more than that. We work with a lot of partners around the state, which I'll talk about. We are Baltimore, but we work with partners statewide on these issues. And the most important thing, of course, is child abuse is not a kid problem, it's an adult problem. We're the perpetrators, we're the ones who ignore it, we're the ones who console. All right, so, children, one bill, easy one, children's advocacy centers. I didn't know what one was until I started working there. And so, for those of you that don't know, a children's advocacy center is the place, if there is a report of child abuse, and by the way, child abuse is expanded, so it means if you have custody or control of a child, if you're supervising a child, if you have authority over a child, it includes sexting, it includes human trafficking. If there is a report to CPS or law enforcement that child should have a forensic interview, which is what? Which is someone who talks to a kid in kid's language and says, tell me all about what happened this weekend over Thanksgiving. Oh, Uncle Sal. Tell me all about Uncle Sal. P-Tom, tell me all about your P-Tom. Tell me all about the poo part and the pee part. And so what happens is kids give credible narrative responses in their own words, should the case ever get to court, holds up in court. One of the bills is simply going to say, listen, there's about 24 CACs in the state, and one of the bills is going to make sure that the national standards that are used, that are funded in the state of Maryland are across the board. So any child anywhere in the Maryland can have access to a nationally accredited children's advocacy centers. They've got mental health services, which I can tell you are great and expanding, medical, family advocates. We have a pretty big team. And so that one, we're partnering with the Maryland Children's Alliance. And so the real drivers on that are the groups that are not accredited and want to be. That bill's coming. It helps kids. The few that make it, that actually do get reported, helps those kids in the long term. Who's that? Everyone knows who that is? Yes. Who's that? Anyone know her? Oh, did someone say it? I heard someone say coach. Yes! Delegate Terry Hill. First person that's known that. Kathy Clage. She is the coach at MSU. What did she do? In 1997, a 16-year-old girl came to her and said, you know, this guy, Larry Nassar, I think he's touching me. Really? She talked to a 16-year-old girl, same thing. What did Kathy Clage do? No, not Dr. Nassar. What did she do? Who did she talk to? Did she report it? She did not. She's got a legal duty to report it. What did she do? She went and to talk 4 other osteopaths. Oh, what he's doing is normal. 2016, more kids. You know he had 200 victims. She didn't report it. You know what she did? You know what she had her students do? The girls, her gymnasts, after he was fired, write him a thank you card. Thinking about you, Nat. Thinking about you, Larry. Sorry that this railroaded. She just got charged. Obstructing justice, lying to police, failure to report child abuse. In Maryland, there's been a bill kicking around for a long time we're one of 2 states that doesn't have an actual consequence if an adult who really knows, like criminal knowledge I'm talking, fails to report known child abuse. Maryland is one of only a couple of states that doesn't have a penalty. There's consequences, but not a penalty. There isn't one. You can get a report to your licensing board or your superintendent of schools, but not a penalty. And so one of the bills with a lot of different partners in the state is to hold mandatory reporters accountable. That one might be coming back. This is Angela. Angela also Brooks. She came and testified. She had a pretty horrific case in Prince George's County where she couldn't charge the principal who ignored about 10 reports of Deontay Caraway who sexually abused 24 fifth graders. Last one, Safer Schools. I see I've got about 30 seconds when I can do it. This is Maryland State Council on Child Abuse and Neglect. Delegate C.T. Wilson. Right now, this happens to be this is one of many, but it happens to be where this happens. So right now, criminal background check can find out if you've been convicted of child sexual abuse, but it can't find out if you're sexual misconduct, if you have been investigated, if you lost your license for abusing kids, and so those teachers get passed again and again and again. This bill stops.
Speaker is Dan Chambers from MSEA.
Yeah, and actually, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And actually, I'm co-presenting with Joe MDlegislative. Joe, tell them what organization you're from.
I'm with Strong Schools, Maryland.
So, I'll give you just 10 seconds of bio. I work for MSEA, which is the state's largest union. We represent about 72,000 public school employees. I've been a union organizer for about 15, 16 years. And today we want to talk to you about this. Today we're going to talk to you about the scope of the problem in public school funding in the state of Maryland. Now, if I were to say today that every kid, no matter where they live, deserves a high-quality public education, raise your hand if you agree with that. Cool, because if you don't raise your hand in this room, we've got a larger problem. But keep them up, because I'm going to ask you a second question. So keep your hands up if you raised it a minute ago. Keep your hand up if you think it's true that we have a high-quality public education in every single neighborhood, no matter where you live, right? No, everybody knows that's not the way it works. Here's the scope of the problem. State of Maryland commissioned a study 2 years ago? 2 years ago. 2 years ago. That found that every single neighborhood school had a funding gap of $2 million between what is needed to present a world-class education for children and what they are now being given by the state of Maryland and local government. So I live in Baltimore County. That's $2 million at my neighborhood school, Westchester Elementary, $2 million at Catonsville Middle, $2 million at Catonsville High, $2 million at Woodmore, $2 million at Western Tech, $2 million at Maiden Choice. Every single one of those buildings, there's a yawning gap between what our kids need. Increasingly, our kids are poorer than they used to be. We're getting better and better at identifying special needs. Kid has a learning disability, but we don't have the resources to provide the services that we know will help. And so there's this gap between what kids need. And of course, more and more kids are coming from all over the world, right? So they come in not knowing the English language and need help learning it. So that is essentially the scope of the problem. For our part, within MSEA, there we go. We ran a series of meetings, about 800 10-minute meetings all over the state in approximately 19 or 20 counties, 10-minute meetings with educators. We got about 14,000, 15,000 educators in these meetings. And we asked them, look, this $2 million funding gap that exists, if I bring in the Publishers Clearinghouse check, everybody remember what a Publishers Clearinghouse check is, right? It's this $2 million on it. How are you going to spend it here at Westchester, here at Catonsville High, here at Catonsville Middle? And in the aggregate, these are the answers we got. And what are the two things that jump out at you?
Class size and adequate staffing.
This is broadly consistent with what they tell us when we conduct professional polling of our members, which we do regularly. Right? We hire pollsters to go and get representative sample size of union members and ask them opinions about what they want, right? The only thing that's not up there that did not come up in these 10-minute meetings that they will tell our pollsters is that they also want to be paid what they think they're worth. No surprise, right? So we ran these meetings, we asked people, what is it that you need? And again, what we hear is, I can't provide these children what they need in order to be able to bring them into the next to bring them into adulthood, right? They're not prepared. And they're not prepared because they've got trauma at home, because they're poor, because they have a learning disability, like go on down the list, because there's behavioral disruptions, throughout the system, on and on and on and on and on. And what do we want? We want staffing. We want more behavioral support specialists, more paraeducators, smaller class size. So I think at this point I'm going to kick it over to Joe.
So first of all, thank you everyone for being here. For those of you that were here last year, you saw myself and Dan present separately, and there's a reason we're presenting together this year, is because we are both on the same page with what the #1 priority for this legislative session is. But a quick kind of background and aside is that the state's been working on this problem for about 2 years, and it's time to move on it. We have a lot of the research, we have a lot of the facts, we have a lot of the background. It's time to move and it's time to get something done. And so Strong Schools Maryland exists explicitly for the reason to pass the Kerwin Commission recommendations, which the Kerwin Commission here is what Dan was referring to. So in 2016, they finally said, let's look at our Thornton funding formula. How we fund schools, we looked at it, or we passed it in 2002, let's look at it again. It's been 15 years. We were supposed to do it 10 years, we waited 15, let's finally do it. So this Kerwin Commission is made up of 25 folks, some legislators, some industry experts, some interest group representatives, and for the last 2 years they've been meeting and saying, how do we take ourselves from the middle of the road in the United States, which the United States is in the middle of the road in the world, and move ourselves to world class? How do we go from middle of the road to world class? And they've come out with 5 policy initiatives that they think move us from to world class. And those 5 policy recommendations are here. None of these should be earth-shattering to anyone. And to all of our friends who are in Annapolis, this is the only place where some of that is earth-shattering. And so all of the folks who have kids, know kids, work with kids, have seen a kid, know that early childhood education matters. It's not a new concept, but we don't fund it in Maryland in an equitable way, nor do we fund it in a way to make sure there's enough high-quality seats for all students. High-quality and diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness pathways, more resources for at-risk students, and then governance and accountability. So I'm going to do a quick about 1 minute on each of these. I'm going to let Dan talk about the high-quality teachers and leaders, if you would like. So early childhood education, this is what they're saying. Their recommendations, again, nothing is final until it's in a bill, and so our goal is to get these really good recommendations into legislation. So in early childhood education is universal pre-K, and then pre-K 3 for all low-income students and all students with disabilities. That alone should be earth-shattering for Maryland, but they're saying that's not enough. Then I'm going to hop down to college and career readiness pathways. This is the one that people, if this passes the way that we have it, mood lighting. If this passes the way that if this passes the way in which it's recommended, this is going to be the one where those of you who have been in high school or have had kids go through high school, this is going to be the one where you look at Maryland high school and say something looks different than when I was there, and that's a good thing. So what they're recommending is actually moving down what we consider college and career readiness to 10th grade. And in 10th grade, we can say, all right, our students can now read and do math. And so in 11th and 12th grade, there should be infinite numbers of pathways, whether that be AP, IB, other college and college readiness courses, or a plethora of CTE recommendations. But the key is...
You might want to say what CTE is.
CTE, so college and career, what we used to call VOTEC. So CTE is the new language for VOTEC, but it's also much more all-encompassing and not just, you know, mechanic and plumbing and things like that, but all the way to computer science and cybersecurity, culinary, including being a mechanic, electrician, everything that falls in between there. And so what's going to happen is in 10th grade you get the college readiness certificate, and then in 11th and 12th grade you can go on any number of these pathways. The key is there's no dead ends, so if you start down, and this is not tracking, but if you start down and say, I want to explore cybersecurity, and you're like, well, actually this sucks, I don't like it at all. You can then go on to any of these other pathways, or if you're like, I know I'm going to University of Maryland and I'm going to study X, I want to take as many AP courses so I'm not paying a lot of money for my college education, I just want to load up on AP credits. That pathway exists as well. The key is, at the end of these pathways, every student must qualify to attend a 4-year university. They don't have to go if they choose not to, but everyone has to have the ability to make that choice, or go straight into an industry. Because right now in Maryland, 2 out of every 3 jobs requires more than a high school diploma, but we're really only graduating about 30 to 35% of students getting that post-high school degree. So we're having to import from other states at massive levels, and at some point those numbers just don't work anymore and our economy falls apart. More resources for at-risk students. This one is also a game changer that can also be pushed to the next level as well. So right now we fund additional money for students who are low income, students who have disabilities, and students who are English language learners. All of those are important, necessary, good. Increasing those numbers, but then also adding a 4th one, which would be concentrated poverty. For those of you who have ever worked in a school where there's high levels of poverty, you know it takes additional resources to educate students in a school where there's high levels of poverty. So they would add a 4th funding weight to the funding formula for every student in a school in concentrated poverty. Whether or not that student's in poverty, every student in that school would get an additional anywhere from $600 to $3,300 to be spent on things that, are needed, that help alleviate some of the symptoms of poverty. And then governance and accountability, we know we did this in 2002. We travel all around the state and talk to folks. And the number one thing people say is like, I thought we did this already. How can we make sure the money's spent the way it needs to? And that's a fair question. So the governance and accountability piece actually matters tremendously. And so there's discussion of creating an organization outside of MSDE's bureaucracy that would be responsible for this 10-year implementation plan and saying, this is what we need, this is what we're funding, we're going to make sure every jurisdiction actually does what we say they're supposed to do and implements it in a way that there's accountability mechanisms. And do you want to talk about
Yeah, sure. Look, the 2 things that I ask you to consider as you're thinking about the problem of quality education and building level leaders is that, in the first place, Maryland educators make 84 cents on the dollar for other professionals who have the same credentials, right? So the comparable professions would be CPA, architect, those kinds of like high-level graduate credential professions. They're making 84 cents on the dollar. And thousands and thousands of school employees don't even make what constitutes a living wage. They don't make enough to be able to pay their rent, to pay more child care, and have health care, and have any kind of money left over. And while Kerwin does not address school support staff, it begins to tackle teachers. For MSEA's part, we're continuing to try and work with the commission to include school support staff, but if it doesn't, we'll be talking to the legislature to make sure that they're not left out of the picture. And how we get there is kind of long and convoluted, but the bottom line is we've got to deal with this issue of educator pay, because you cannot attract the world's brightest people and put them in one of the most complex, time-pressured, and just like very intense jobs and not pay them what they're worth.
And so the question of how do we get there, the whole goal of this is we want you to leave with the ability to get involved and do something right now. So Strong Schools Maryland has been organizing for the last year and a half. MSEA has 72,000 members, about 72,000 members that are engaged in this and they're doing work on this. Strong Schools Maryland's been working with folks who are outside of affiliated organization. I actually see some of our folks in here. We call them team leaders. And they meet once a month and they have these conversations about what's up with Kerwin, and then they take a coordinated action. And so we started with 10 teams. We're up to 161 teams across the state. If you know anyone on the Eastern Shore, there's obviously very sparsely populated, let me know. We'd love to talk to some folks out there. But they meet once a month, they take action. This is what you get. You actually get physical materials in the mail. That's good, and I would love to encourage you to do that, but there's something more that I'm going to ask you to do that might not be as labor intensive, but will make a massive impact. And so we know how to win because we've done it before.
So last year, we gathered 1,100 educators in Annapolis, 1,200 in Annapolis, to make sure the legislature would pass a bill allowing you to vote on question 1. Anybody vote on question 1?
Yes.
You're in good company. 89% of all Marylanders voted yes on question 1. The reason you could vote on question 1 was because we got together in Annapolis to urge the legislature to pass a bill putting it on the ballot in the first place, right? So the proposition that Joe and I have for all of you today is that we know we can do this because we just did this. And it's therefore, this is an attainable goal.
And so when we looked at this 89-11 win, this is the largest ballot question win in 24 years. And it didn't happen by accident. It happened because people were organized and people cared and said, we need to invest in our schools. This is step 1. Step 1 is good. Step 1 doesn't get us to the finish line.
It's about $500 million a year in revenue. And if you remember, I said that the funding gap is about $3 billion, right, between where we need to go and where we are today. So this is a very important step in the right direction. It is necessary, not sufficient.
Yeah, and so this is what we're going to ask you to do. Number one is take a shift. Strong Schools Maryland is going to be organizing every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in Annapolis the entire legislative session. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 9 a.m. to 11:30. Those times matter because that's when legislators walk on the floor, and that's when we can have conversations with them and let them know, hey, have you passed Kerwin yet? We would obviously say it much more politely, but that's when we talk with legislators. So if you go to our website, the first thing you'll see is join us for a day in Annapolis. All you do is you click that, it'll take you to a link, and you sign up and you pick your day. We will do everything else for you. We will email you a reminder. We will give you a t-shirt. A t-shirt, everyone. You'll get a t-shirt for coming to Annapolis. We'll give you talking points. We'll give you layouts of who to talk to, what to say. So if you're like, I really want to be in Annapolis, but I don't know what to say to folks, that's okay. You're about to join thousands of other people who have jobs and things to do and maybe aren't in the weeds on this. And so we can help you, and we can help you make that difference. Go to our website, strongschoolsmaryland.org, click the banner, pick a shift, and then the second one is be there on March 11th and join 15,000 other people from across the state.
We'll be working intensely over the next 3 months to build out turnout for this event. Our goal is to have, like you said, 15,000. And I want you to pull back just for a second. We just got through an election, right? The governor won, despite many of our best efforts, right? We have another 4 years with Governor Hogan. As you've heard today, the legislature is going to look somewhat the same, and in many ways very different, right? So Joe started out by saying, well, we've talked about it for 2 years, and that's true. We have a window, and that window is narrowing for us to make a essentially once-in-a-generation shift in the way that schools are funded in the state of Maryland. If it's going to happen, it has to happen now. So we keep putting it off and putting it off. The political will to get anything done, what does it happen? Does it go up?
Never.
No, right? Never. Never increases. It always decreases.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ricard Jones with 1199 SEIU. I represent healthcare workers across the state of Maryland. How's everybody today? Good. All right, so I want to talk to you about the Fight for 15. Our proposed legislation, we are proposing that we raise the minimum wage in the state of Maryland to $15 an hour. And we want to make sure that we include the majority of workers in the state, which includes tip workers. Does anybody know how much tip workers make right now?
$3.35 or something.
They make about $3.63 an hour. Yeah. So that means that a lot of the tip workers are relying on tips in order to make up their full income. So that means from week to week, they have no idea how much they're going to make, right? So how can we budget that way? And then it means you're also relying on people being generous. That leads to a lot of sexual harassment within for tip workers. We're in the Me Too movement, so tip workers get a lot of sexual harassment because they have to depend on the generosity of folks for their income. We heard Delegate Hill talk about youth workers. We want to make sure that we include youth workers in the full minimum wage because a lot of these folks are not just kids working for cash for the weekend. They're actually working to support their households and bringing additional income into the house. And our bill would increase the minimum wage about $1 a year until we get to $15 by 2023. We want to do this so that we make sure we give businesses enough time to adjust. And then it also is going to include indexing so that we don't have to keep coming back to the Maryland General Assembly and asking for minimum wage increases. We're going to tie it to the cost of living.
Good idea.
So, this bill is long overdue, right? If you look at this map, you can see that there's nowhere in the state of Maryland right now, from Western Maryland to the Eastern Shore, that you can survive right now to less than $15 an hour. The United Way actually released a report last year and said that more than 825,000 households of folks who are working full-time, they can't afford the high cost of living in our state. So that means that they're working, but they can't afford basic necessities. When I say basic, I'm talking about housing, transportation, healthcare, and that means that they are unable to cover their basic needs. So this bill is long overdue because we live in one of the wealthiest states, so it's about time that we raise the minimum wage. And when we talk about raising the minimum wage, it's going to pump about $2.6 billion into our economy. Does anybody know why? How that works? There we go, it's a circle, right? So when low-wage workers make more money, they spend more money. And also increases public safety. There's data to show that when we increase the minimum wage, it increases public safety. It also helps to improve outcomes for children's education and health care. So this bill would help about 573 workers across the state of Maryland. On top of the fact that we all benefit, right? When workers make enough to support themselves and their families, we all benefit. And it will also help 273,000 kids and many of our veterans, right? So we have our folks who, they go and they risk their lives for us and they come back and they end up having to work minimum wage jobs. This would help to increase their pay as well. And then, you know, our opposition likes to say that minimum wage workers are teenagers working at McDonald's. But in reality, the typical worker that would benefit in the state of Maryland is a 36-year-old woman with some college education who's working full-time. And she may be working in a job like a preschool teacher, healthcare worker, a security guard, a bank teller. Overall, it affects 300,000 women in our state and over 200,000 workers of color. So we know that when we increase the minimum wage, this is just one way that we can help to reduce the gender and racial pay gap and reverse decades of pay inequality. So, one of the things when we talk about minimum wage, when we get to Annapolis, people are always like, what about small businesses? How is this gonna hurt? It's gonna hurt small businesses. It's actually not true, right? We just talked about it. When we pay folks more, they end up having to spend more money. So you have a worker who now has the money to buy groceries, to buy, you know, their kids some shoes for school, and that money is going right into the pockets of small businesses in our local, right in our local communities. It also, when we have places like Walmart who pays poverty wages, ooh, we all end up bearing the cost for corporate welfare, right? We all end up paying for that because they pay their wages, they pay their workers their wages so low that we all end up having to share the cost when they end up having to rely on public assistance. So we've had some victories, right? Montgomery County. We also saw some wins in New York, California, and DC. So because this bill is such a win-win, not only for workers, but the economy and small business, we're hoping that Maryland's gonna be next, right?
Yeah.
So, just really quickly, how can you help? We have a pledge card that we're asking legislators to sign on so that they can say that they support a strong, clean $15 minimum wage bill. We are also asking you to connect us to local businesses if you know small business owners that are willing to be a part of our coalition. There's Bridget in the corner. Hopefully a lot of you guys saw her earlier in the hallway, but she's our business organizer. So please connect with her if you know business owners. And we also have our social media page. We're on Facebook. And then if any of your organizations are interested in being a part of our coalition, we would love to have you. We typically meet in Annapolis. And I just want to say thank you all for being here today, and thank you to the amazing organizers of this event. You know, democracy only works when we all participate. So,
next up is Jen Diamond of the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition.
Good morning, everyone. Hi. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to try to be exciting myself. My name is Jen Diamond. I am the Program and Communications Manager of the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition. We are a nonprofit that works statewide towards economic justice and financial inclusion for all Marylanders. We do that not only through advocacy, but through research, direct service, consumer education, and organizing. So I'm going to talk a little today about a couple of our priority bills. We have a lot going on, so if you're interested in what we're up to, I urge you to visit our website, which is just marylandconsumers.org. You have my boss's email address in your program as well, so feel free to email her. or me, which is the same, just Jen at marylandconsumers.org. So this year we're breaking up our bills into a couple of buckets, and the first one I want to talk about is our Debtors' Bill of Rights. Debt reform in Maryland is something we've been working on for a while, and if you look at other states around ours, we have a pretty abysmal debt collection system here. So what we're doing to try to address that is two things. One is looking at the debt exemption threshold. And what that means is it's the amount you're allowed to protect when you're being pursued for debt collection. In Maryland, if you are being pursued for debt collection, the wages that folks lose out during that process can push people below the poverty line. So what we're looking to do is tie the debt exemption threshold to Maryland minimum wage, because we think minimum wage is literally that, the bare minimum. We should not be losing more than that in order to be paying back wages. We see a lot of people who are owing money to landlords, bail bond issues in this way. All the states around us have a higher debt exemption threshold. So we have a bill in this year, that's with Senator Will Smith and Delegate Eric Barron, to raise our debt exemption threshold because we don't think people should go into poverty because they owe a small debt. The other piece of that is eliminating the use of body attachments in Maryland. Maryland's constitution says that debtors' prison should be outlawed, but there is still a mechanism in our laws that allows people to go to jail for small debts, which is pretty disturbing to think about. There was a article recently that was in Wired, if you want to look it up, about a man who owed an $87 vet bill who didn't pay it back, and he was basically issued some citation to come to court. He didn't receive it because, as we know, service doesn't always go to the person it's supposed to go to. When he didn't show up, he had a body attachment issued on his person. It's like a body lien. He was picked up and put in jail for an $87 vet bill. So what we're looking to do is make sure that that is just taken out of our laws, that you can't be put in jail for a small debt. So that's our debtors bucket. The bucket that I work on primarily is our student lending reform bucket. Student loans are at $1.5 trillion. That's just going up. And states right now, since the Department of Education is really failing us right now in protecting student borrowers, we are looking at a student loan bill of rights, which has been passed and is being worked on in many, many other states throughout the country. It would look at licensing student loan servicers as debt collectors. A servicer is the person who acts as the go-between between the lender and the borrower. So Navient's a really big one. That used to be Sallie Mae. There's a lot of other ones, but we found that they're acting in ways just like mortgage servicers did leading up to the financial crisis. They're putting people on bad repayment plans that are unaffordable. They're misapplying payments, so folks are getting pushed into greater amounts of debt as interest accrues, and they're just generally harassing borrowers as they're trying to just find the best way to pay back their debt. So this bill would make sure that as people are going through that payment process, there's actually someone there looking out for them to make sure that if they qualify for something like income-driven repayment, that they're able to get on it. It's good for everyone. It's good for taxpayers because so many of these programs, if you're not paying back your debt, taxpayers are the ones to pay for that. So that's a big part of that. We're also looking at working on for-profit colleges and career schools. If you haven't heard about those, go Google it. It's really, really fascinating, but really disturbing. They're predatory schools with a for-profit mission. ITT Tech was one that closed recently. Corinthian Colleges was one as well. The data shows that these schools really go after low-income folks, people of color, veterans, put them into huge amounts of debt without any career options at the end. They give you very poor education because all they're trying to do is make money off of Title IV, those federal student loans. So Maryland's done a pretty good job at regulating them, but we're going back to do some more regulation around them and make sure that students who are being preyed upon these schools have options to get money back if their school commits an act of fraud, etc. We also have a screening on Failed State. It's an amazing documentary which is going to be held on this Tuesday at Morgan State University. It's free. I urge you all to come. It's about this issue and the filmmaker will be there. It's produced by Dan Rather. It's really great. So hope you all can make it. Look it up on our Facebook page. The last thing I'll mention is we're working on some auto insurance bills. Maryland has some of the highest auto insurance rates in the entire country if you drive. I'm sure you know this. One of the things that causes that is that we use a lot of non-driving related factors to price auto insurance. These are things like your zip code, your gender, your marital status, your credit score, how much education you have, what job you have, and cumulatively these factors mean that low-income people are essentially subsidizing wealthier people. In fact, there were some studies with the Consumers Union in New York that looked at Maryland. If you have 2 DUIs but live in a wealthy zip code in Baltimore City, like Roland Park, you pay less than someone with a totally clean driving record who lives in a low-income zip code like Park Heights. And that's bad for everyone because it means we're incentivizing the wrong things. So we have a bill in this year to look at removing education and occupation, as well as credit score, and probably one that's gender and marital status. So that's one we need a lot of support on. All of these bills, we need your stories. That's a huge way to help. If you have a story about a student loan servicer that's been acting in a predatory way, about your insurance going up or down when something very silly happened, like your zip code changed or something like that, that's really important. If you have a story about debt collection being a problem for you or someone you know, those stories are what actually really motivates the legislature to act. So please visit our website. If you get on our mailing list, you'll hear about all the ways to engage with us. We have a lobby day in February on consumer rights issues with the Cash Campaign of Maryland, so we'd love to have you at that as well. Thank you all.
Maryland Clerk.
Hi all, how you doing?
Hi.
I don't have a presentation either, but I'll just put my website up so you don't have to stare at me the whole time. Oh, that's not my website. It autofills when I do it on my own computer. So my name is Emily Scarr. I'm the director of Maryland PIRG, which is a statewide citizen-funded public interest advocacy organization. We work on a wide range of issues and focus on issues where there's a specific private interest that benefits at the expense of the public. It means a lot of public health issues, consumer protection, good government issues. My top priorities right now are around money and politics, so I chair the Maryland Fair Elections Coalition. We've been working at the city and county level to set up small donor public financing of our elections. So if you're in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, or Howard County, congratulations, you have small donor public financing. If you're in Baltimore City and you want to help out, we passed the ballot initiative this November and now have to push it to City Council, and we're building the support to do so at the state level. I also chair the Maryland Campaign to Keep Antibiotics Working, which is a coalition of public health, consumer groups, environmental groups, and others working to stop the overuse of antibiotics on our farms, which is driving the rising crisis of antibiotic resistance. But I wanted, and then I'd say the other priority that Damon's going to talk about next is around voting access, voting rights, working to establish same-day voter registration. But today I wanted to talk to you about one of our other priority issues for the session, which is toxic chemical exposure. We're exposed to thousands of toxic chemicals every day in our food, the air, drinking water, products all around us, and very few of the chemicals that are in our products are ever tested for safety by the government. And of those, thousands that are on the, hundreds that are on the market have been shown to have links to negative health impacts. Cancer, learning disabilities, reproductive issues, you name it. We've seen the rate of chronic diseases drastically rising around cancer, endocrine disruption, fertility, learning disabilities, attention deficit, lower IQ, obesity. There are a lot of factors which contribute to these problems, but toxic chemical exposure is certainly one of them. In particular, the chemicals we're taking a look at during this legislative session are toxic flame retardants. These chemicals are added to the products we use every day by initiative of the chemical industry decades ago, saying this will help protect people from fires. Unfortunately, they have shown that they don't do that, and in fact are causing more harm than good, because they don't reduce the impacts of fire at all. And in fact, we're being exposed to them needlessly through the air, through dust, through touching them, as well as our firefighters are put in tremendous risk, because once they actually do set on fire, they create incredibly toxic gases. So over half of firefighter line of duty deaths are actually cancer related. And this is one of the chemicals that we should immediately be taking out of our products because it serves no function whatsoever. The U.S. Consumer too many acronyms. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission actually has released strong guidance saying that manufacturers of furniture and children's products should stop using this, and they did that in the fall of 2017. Unfortunately, since then, the Trump administration has appointed some new members of that commission, so we don't actually expect anything to happen from that, but that is still pretty incredible that after years of scientific review, they came to that conclusion. So now we're turning to the states to actually step in and protect their citizens. This spring, California passed a law to stop the additive of these chemicals in children's products and furniture, and we're hoping Maryland can do the same thing. We work really closely with the Professional Firefighters Association, that's the union that represents the firefighters who are the strongest proponents of getting rid of these toxic chemicals, as well as a number of environmental groups and public health groups who are working on the campaign. So specifically, the 2019 bill will ban this entire class of flame retardants. Maryland has been on the front end of this fight. We've banned a number of the most toxic flame retardants in our babies' products, but this will go a whole step further and ban the entire class, saying these chemicals don't help and they're causing harm, so let's just stop them completely. So it's very ambitious, the bill we're pushing, but we think because California has already done it and a number of other states are considering doing so as well, that we have a real chance. That's why I think I did that real quick. So are there any quick questions about this issue or any of the other issues we work on? And if not, I'll choose another one to talk about. Yes?
Last year there was legislation to try to limit the chlorpyrifos.
Chlorpyrifos?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I believe that didn't pass.
Correct. That's another bill we're supporting. It'll be back. There's been a lot of, similarly, the federal government said you should ban it. There's a lot of court cases going on around potentially just banning that through the federal government, but there will be a bill introduced that, I expect there will be a bill introduced on that as well, which we're supporting. The other issue that I'd say that has been one of our top priorities I alluded to is stopping the overuse of antibiotics on our farms. 70% of antibiotics used in the United States, or sold in the United States, are actually sold for use on animals, not humans. And they're not used to treat sick animals, unfortunately, but given in small doses to animals to compensate for unhygienic and cramped living conditions. And this is really contributing to the drastic rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which is becoming a global health crisis. There were estimates that 20,000 people in the United States died every year as a direct link to antibiotic resistance, but last week of Thanksgiving they released a report that said, oh, actually we think it's more like 150,000 people. And the doctors are saying if we don't act soon, our antibiotics will no longer work. We'll return to a pre-antibiotic era where common infections could again be deadly. That 2050, it's expected to kill as many people as cancer does today. So Maryland has been at the forefront of this. In 2017, we passed a law to ban the use of antibiotics on Maryland farms for animals that are not sick. Unfortunately, the Hogan administration has been slow to release the regulations, and the draft regulations they have released don't fulfill the intent of the law. So we're working really hard to make sure they revise those and ideally just fix them, but if not, we'll be prepared to go back to the legislative session and fix it through legislation. So if that's something you're interested in working on, please feel free to reach out to the MDA and the Hogan administration or connect with me if we have to go for a legislative fix. But again, my information's in the packet. That's the best way to connect with me. This is our website, but feel free to email me if you're interested in participating more on these campaigns. We certainly look a lot for anyone who has professional relationships that may help with this. Doctors, public health officials, nurses, or if you've had personal experience with any of these issues, that's really helpful as well. Thank you so much. Sorry I talked so fast.
Thank you. Next up was Jillian Drummond after a traffic accident encounter. And she's from Maryland Now, our sponsor.
Hello, everyone. I'll just take 2 minutes because the amazing delegate Terry Hill spoke earlier about the Asian Women Initiative bill that she's working on, and she has been an incredible ally and advocate for women's rights and to Maryland Now for years. So I just want to introduce myself. I reactivated the Baltimore chapter of Now last year. So some of you might be thinking, she's not from Baltimore, she's not from Maryland, I haven't seen her before, and you'd be right. I lived in New York for the last 5 years, and then I'm originally from Illinois. My parents are from Jamaica, and I learned from my mother in particular that no matter where you are in the world, to make sure that your voice is heard and fight for equal access, gender equity, and equal pay for women, for yourself, for women, and for your community. And so that's why I reactivated the Baltimore chapter of NOW, because NOW has been on the front line of women's rights and women's advocacy for decades. And I would love to see all of you at our events. I would love to see all of you get engaged and participate with us and in the fight. And so we have a table out there, there's candy, so come sign up and introduce yourself. And we're really proud and happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian and Marilyn now. Next up is Damon Effingham of the Common Cause.
Thanks so much. Howdy everybody, my name is David Effingham. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause Maryland. Throughout today, we've heard a lot about, a lot of people say different things around the message that in order for our democracy to work, you have to have your voice heard. And that's all about what Common Cause works on. We work on voting rights reform. We want to make sure and expand access. We work on money in politics reform. We work on redistricting reform. We work on government ethics and open government laws to try and make Maryland's government work best for everyone here. So I want to talk to you about two of our big priorities this year. First, to piggyback on Emily's comments earlier, we, along with Marilyn Perg and Progressive Maryland, lead the Fair Elections Maryland work here in the state and have led the efforts in Montgomery County and Howard County and Prince George's County and Baltimore City to expand publicly funded elections so that regular people can run for office and regular people can donate to those candidates and make an impact against other folks who can donate $6,000 a pop. These programs have been incredibly powerful. Montgomery County just went through their first one, and publicly funded candidate won for executive. Multiple publicly funded candidates won down the ballot in the county council. So we're really happy with those results and really looking forward to other counties. Common Cause Maryland's nonpartisan, so we don't prefer any candidates win or lose, but we were pleased to see the candidates in Frederick County, candidates in Baltimore County, and candidates in Anne Arundel County all ran partially talking about wanting to install one of these programs in their counties as well. So if you live in one of those counties, if you want to talk about helping to empower regular people against the tide of money coming into our politics, please check out Deffingham at commoncause.org. It's in your program. I want to talk to you so that we can work together going forward. We're also going to be working with Delegate Mosby out of Baltimore City on advancing a statewide program here that would apply to state senators and General Assembly members. All of these programs are very similar to a bill that's coming to the House floor in January from Maryland's Representative Sarbanes, who I used to work in his office, and now I'm just stammering on his name. That bill, H.R. 1, will be a nationwide program similar to what we just saw in Montgomery County. So that's a very exciting thing to look up on the national side as well. The second piece that we're really focusing on for the legislative session is on same-day registration, election day registration. I came to you all last year, talked about how President Trump had come into office spreading lies about millions of illegal voters. Fortunately, those lies have been countered very well. Fortunately, his fraudulent voter fraud panel has died. Yes. But unfortunately, there are still states like North Carolina that just passed the voter ID that is unnecessary. There are states like Texas and Wisconsin that have voter IDs and have legislators picking and choosing their voters, much like the problem of redistricting. They're picking and choosing their voters by saying, oh, this college ID, that's fine, you can vote with that. But that college ID from this more liberal place, no, I think you're going to need something else. Hunting license, always fine. That's good. So we, last year, came to you all talking about two policies, automatic voter registration and election day registration. Automatic voter registration passed with bipartisan support. It will go into effect in July 1st, 2019. So thank you all for your support. Anybody that worked with us, I really appreciate it. The second piece was election day registration, which required a constitutional amendment. We were question 2. We didn't quite do as well as question 1 with their 77%, but not to begrudge them their support. But we did win with 67% of the vote, getting more votes than Governor Hogan, and having a strong mandate for a very expansive program here in Maryland. So we're going to be working with legislators to make sure that this program is open and accessible to every eligible Marylander, regardless of race, color, creed, amount of money in your bank account. We want to make sure that your voice is heard in elections. So if you want to work with us to make sure that we're pressuring the legislature to create as strong and robust a program like this as possible, to show the rest of the country that real democracy works when everyone is heard, not when we're picking and choosing our voters, please reach out to me. I want to work with you. I want to pressure your legislators to make sure that we can have a real, strong democracy in Maryland. Thank you all very much.